morning.
Good morning.
It's another Conscious Conversations Tuesday. They come quick, but I feel like they're well timed too, where it's like, oh, this is a good time in the week to be able to get some Nikki time and, have our live conversations. So, I'm excited about this topic. I think we've touched on it in almost every single conscious conversation, but we're going to go at it a little bit different angle today. And it's talking about triggers as our teachers and really learning how to be more curious and conscious over some of those buttons that get pushed in us. And we've talked about things before, like people going slow in the fast lane, listening to people chew, random ones. But we've pulled a list of the top 20, not that we're going to hit on every one of these, but the top 20 most common triggers that we face every single day. And I think it's going to be a great conversation to just, touch on which ones speak the most to us and what is the greatest, what's the greatest lessons to be learned from each of them. So what are your thoughts about our conversation today, Nikki?
I like it. I was already getting a little triggered looking at some of them. So I was like, okay, learning opportunity. And definitely I was feeling the theme of some of the things we've talked about. I'm like, oh, these are for sure mine because I feel the same thing, right? And just how I show up and like grow through them. The other thing that I want to touch on today, Amy, is how we use the gift of discernment to see the growth opportunity and lean into that. But then also sometimes it's a boundary violation and how we handle that. Like we don't need to grow, don't push ourselves to grow sometimes, discern it and be like, this is actually a boundary and I don't need to be in that consciously.
Yeah. I think there is there's always, it's good to reflect on what's the lesson meant for me here and what do I need to set a hard and fast, absolutely not tolerating it, not putting up with it, or I need to advocate for myself here. So should we just kind of read off we'll read off the top 20. And I'm curious, as you all are listening, which one speaks the most to you? And maybe it's a couple. And of course you may be like, maybe all 20, depending on, the person and the situation. I think that happens too. Like time in life, location, relationship with the person changes, what tends to trigger us. So number 1, being criticized. 2, being ignored or overlooked. 3, very similar to 2, not being heard in meetings. 4, being micromanaged. 5, others getting credit for your work. 6, being interrupted. 7, slow progress or delays. 8, lack of appreciation. 9, disagreement or conflict. And 10, being wrong. I'll just stop at the first 10. We can stop there. And I'm curious for you, Nikki, which one stands out the most in that list of 10?
I would say the first one. So I'd put that in the words I feel is judgment. Like that criticized or judgment, where I get defensive. Like I want them to understand my viewpoint and that the way I'm thinking about it could be different. And then I'm trying to kind of prove myself so that they can see me in a different way. And it becomes this, I'm trying to win this conversation here so that you can see my side. I fall into this is one of mine.
I totally agree with that. And if I'm thinking about relationships in my life, like which one, kind of triggers me the most, how I handle it is different based on where it's from, right? So if I were to be criticized by a client, I would probably feel the same emotion. Like I think I would feel defensive. I might feel like really frustrated or angry. Like my fight or flight would likely get hit with that. But I would respond definitely with more like curiosity and openness and, all of that. If my husband is criticizing me, it really depends on how tapped into my own mindfulness and consciousness I am in that moment. So just take us to a golf course, and there are times where I can take he says feedback. It feels like criticism, but that's okay. I can take it better than others. Relationally for you, are there some are there some dynamics in your life where it feels easier to hear quote unquote criticism than others?
Oh, for sure. I think, you're hitting it on the head that the deeper the relationship, the more emotion. So you think, okay, it's family holiday time of the year, everybody's together, and you're reverting back to, you know, your 15-year-old self with your sibling or whatever, right? And the sibling who's picking at you for choices you're making in your life, it's like, oh, I mean, it goes there fast, versus meeting someone new, and this is like the second conversation, and we're, having dinner, and something comes up, like I'm a lot more, I don't know, like I have a lot more of a gap before I'm going to get triggered.
Yeah, it's that, as we've talked about prior in some of these conversations, it's reaction and response. And as I love that you said, like, the deeper the relationship, I think the deeper the relationship, the closer the reaction response time frame. Like, it's a split second, right? So which consciousness doesn't exist without space and awareness. So, I think we can be very reactionary, and because the dynamics go so deep, it's so hardwired in our body that no matter how much work we've done on ourselves, it's very easy to get pulled back into it. And I think with client relationships, or even like colleagues or whatever, listen, some of us may still be very reactionary, and that's not a judgment. I think it's just a reflection on, like, okay, it's interesting. Like, let's dig into that. But I do think that because the emotional connection is less, we can create more space.
Yeah. Well, and I think, old wounds can get reopened because, it's like, okay, here's my brother. He said something. It's not really what he said in now. It's something that it reminded me of the past. And so I just went there really fast. And so, like, the insight is like, whatever he just said really isn't the thing. It's because there's so much depth there. Or there's people in our lives that, we're just more invested in their opinion. The person I'm sitting with at dinner that I don't know all that well, it doesn't hit me as emotionally because I don't care about them, I guess that's the word, care about them as deeply or something. So I'm just more invested in, like, I don't want them to think that of me, or they're rejecting me, so that in it, so many times it's not the here and now, it's really stuff of the past or whatever with those relationships that we have to be aware of.
I think it's, as we're looking through these triggers too, where my mind goes, and what I will encourage anybody listening into this conversation to be curious about is what is the trigger? But then what am I feeling in my body? Like, am I feeling angry? Am I feeling ashamed? Like, what am I feeling in my body? And I think being able to, to dig into that, and is there some place and time in your life that it brings you back to? So, like, for me, being criticized, this is not, not to throw my dad under the bus, but if I think of who was the person that criticized me the most growing up, which is where most of our hardwiring comes from, it was definitely my dad. Like, and that was just his way of communicating. Even, like, he communicated through criticism. And so what did I feel when I was a kid? Small, unworthy, and then we begin to write these stories on top of it. And so the trigger that's being pushed, to your point, isn't the one that happened in this moment. It's the moments that happened so many years ago that rehashes that old story. But there's a chance for us to work on, rewiring and paying more attention to that. Identify the feeling or the emotion, see if you can access the memory that's there, hold like yourself in that feeling with a space of compassion and love. I think, it, like, what's underneath, is it a feeling of lack of worthiness? The criticism, like, what do you really feel may be true? Is it lack of worthiness? And then can you walk yourself through kind of proving that wrong? Like, where can I prove this old hardwiring wrong through all of the ways I can count that I know I'm good and I know I'm worthy? I think that's a way we slowly, rewire. I'm curious I know we're really honing in on this criticism thing, but I imagine it's something everybody can relate to. And an automatic response, like, is it fight, flight, or fawn? I think that's helpful for us to recognize too, because if you're in fight, you are persecutor on Cartman's drama triangle. If you're flight, you're in victim or freeze, you're in victim mode. If you're in fawn, you are in rescue mode. So Nikki, do you go more fight, flight, fawn? Like, what's your response when criticism is hit?
Totally fight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That takes me back to Tulum, one of our retreats that Nikki was on, and our dear friend Tina Moe was there, and Des. So we have all been a part of a kind of mastermind group. It's evolved over the years, but the four of us have really been a tight knit group. And we did this exercise in Tulum that was like, stand in the area that you think you most are in Cartman's drama triangle: victim, rescuer, persecutor. Literally everyone in the room went to rescuer, and the four of us were standing on persecutor. And we're like, oh, well, this is interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's work through this together for months ahead.
Yeah. We're like, oh, no wonder we all gravitate towards each other. Again, none of it's good or bad. I just think the recognition is really powerful. All right. So if we look at some more of these, like the being ignored or overlooked, being micromanaged, somebody else getting credit for your work, interrupted, slow progress, delays, lack of appreciation, being wrong, do any of those tend to get you riled up?
I would say micromanaged and anything related to being slow. Like, and then there's other ones when you were saying though, I'm like, yeah, I don't really care. I mean, that doesn't really do it for me. It's just interesting how you feel just thinking through those. Maybe like not appreciated for something, thinking like the 5 love languages and what is it? Words of affirmation or something. I think it's that for me, it's just not something. So for others that need that, I have to be really conscious because I don't naturally need it or think about it. So I have to be very conscious for others that do. It's interesting, our human needs, right? On the micromanaged or slow, anything with those, I feel it immediately. I'm like, yeah. How about you?
I agree. And as I'm looking through, I'm like, being interrupted doesn't bother me. And especially if I can sense the intention is they just have something exciting to share. If it's a matter of dismissiveness, like, yeah, what you say doesn't matter. I don't know if I've ever come across that, but I also think it's perception of like we could be interrupted and I could take it as, oh, they're really excited to share what they have to say. Or I could take it as they don't care what's coming out of my mouth. And all of that is based on our own feelings about ourselves. Like it's really interesting, right? So like I look at some of these, to your point, they don't seem to bother me. A lack of appreciation. There's probably been times I don't see that as a real, challenge. Others getting credit for your work, like, I guess it depends on who and when. I don't know. That doesn't necessarily bother me, but definitely slow progress or delays. I feel that for sure in my soul.
Yeah. And let's go there for a second on how do we not make our thing the big thing? Like someone else, we work in teams or in couples, our partners, our families, and how do we honor the fact that someone else, the appreciation thing is theirs, right? And just that's where it becomes human dynamics are challenging and where you get to be very conscious and sensitive to others because we could so simply overlook that doesn't even matter because it doesn't matter to us.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a good thing to not let others' triggers trigger you, because there's something deeper within that. If it's like, God, I don't know, they always need recognition, or they're mad, or they need their hand held. Like we start to create this critical story or this judgmental story around somebody else. And I think that's interesting that, ego hooks ego. So our triggers often have some sort of ego wound wrapped around them, and we're all going to carry them with us. And sometimes we make them other people's, like we project it on other people. But if we're witnessing it, and if we want to be conscious, I do think it's incredibly helpful not to let ego hook ego. So like I had, for example, I was coaching a group of clients last week, and they were really angry that people that they're onboarding on their team kept saying, we never learned this. And they're like, we did teach them this. They do know this stuff. And they were so angry. And I said, well, what is it about that that's triggering you? And it was, they're making us look bad. They're making us look like we're not doing our job. They're, and it was like the trigger of the student who didn't want to be wrong and was fearful of being wrong. The outward effect of that was, you never taught us, triggered their ego's response, so ego triggers ego. So I think it's interesting to try and look, just like with ourselves, to try and look at others' triggers with curiosity and from a place of neutrality, so that we can try and see the deeper meaning in it and realize it's not personal. It's not really about us.
Mm-hmm. It makes me also think about leading others' triggers, right? As a leader, you take what you're learning to then help others, and someone else is dealing with these triggers that may not, trigger you, but how do you help them and lead them through it? We're always going to struggle with triggers that we're like, oh, I arrived. I don't have them anymore. I'm great at this. It's just, you're working on it yourself, but then how do you lead others? Because they come up every day. Let's maybe talk about that for a few minutes.
This is why I love the ego work so much. And what we'll do is, in the community under the conscious conversations, I'll pop in the ego assessment for people to take. Mm-hmm. I think whether you have a team of people that you can have take this assessment or not, I think just having a conversation before the triggers hit of open and curiosity of saying, hey, what are some of the things that tend to push your buttons that make you either want to shut down or have you feeling angry, feeling like you're not supported? What are some of those examples? And can you help me understand how they show up? And some people may know and some people may not. Some of us, have a deeper understanding or a deeper awareness of self than others. And again, that's not a judgment. It's just purely a muscle that we can continue to build. But I think knowing about what it might look like before it happens gives us more power to have conversation over it. Or, in the after effect, I think in the moment of emotion is not the best time to try and teach or coach. It's like seeing someone drown and trying to give them a swim lesson. Nope, we just need to help in this moment, but let's use it as, let's teach them to swim after, right? Because we don't want to have to come in and rescue them from drowning again. So in the after effect, you might share some feedback of saying, I've noticed this seems to come up for you. Can we dig into that? How do you want to talk about it? How would you rather respond? And I think it's a conversation of you as a leader learning how to own your part, which is how you think, feel, and respond to the situation, and encouraging them to own their part, which is how they think, feel, and respond in those situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really powerful reminder, or to pause and not be solving it in the moment when things are heated. But using that as an example opportunity for a one-on-one, just to be able to talk through it and give space for that. I think that's really powerful. There's like an example coming to mind. We're in a meeting and there is someone triggered and they're crossed arms, eyes rolled, and they are not going for what this person is sharing. Mm-hmm. And it might, taking us back to, there's probably more depth there with that relationship. It's probably not right now, whatever they said, that's it, and just being able to pick up on those cues that obviously there's something way more here. These two people, they've got some tension. That happens a lot. There are people that just conflict and have a hard time working together. And then you're all in a meeting and there's one person that's just losing their shit, and eye rolling or whatever, and how we step in to lead that to help them. What comes up for you there?
I think there's two things. Like in the moment, body language speaks louder than anything. Body language is 55% of how we communicate. So even though their mouth may say something different, like, no, I'm fine, there's nothing, right? And the tone that goes with that is very telling too. The body language is telling you what they're really thinking and feeling. And it can be conscious or subconscious. They may consciously be saying, I want you to know and see that I'm pissed, or it could be a subconscious response. But when I've been in those moments of maybe it's leading a training or even having like a selling conversation, with somebody, and if you can sense there's tension, I like to give that person space to be heard and just say, my gut says that you've got some feelings about this. Are you open to sharing? Or I sense this may not be landing with you. Like help me see what feels like disjointed here, and just giving them space to be heard. Almost always I've had people who are like, that's what they're waiting for. They're kind of almost like in their child ego state. They're a little bit like throwing a hissy fit because they don't feel like they're being heard and they have a different opinion. So give them the space to hear it. Now, we, the person who's leading that, we've got to be in our own conscious mind to not then get hooked in if it's going to be defensive or whatever, but to be able to really guide it. This is why I love Stoicism so much and Stoic principles. I've recommended to so many clients the daily Stoic, just like practicing one reading and then the journal, or the book The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. Like Stoic principles really can help us learn how to manage emotion in strong emotional situations. So that would be my recommendation. If that's not the case, then always have an after the plan. Like if we're not addressing it, then we are silently agreeing to it. And then we are complicit in the frustration that we feel. So after the fact, you have a conversation, like decide what you're willing to tolerate or not, especially if you are the leader of that team, then that's your place to step in and decide what you're willing to tolerate and not, and have a coaching conversation.
It's good. And the reminder that going back to, the victim, persecutor, rescuer, that example I just gave is like a overt, probably persecutor response of the person that's, the harsh body language and the rolling eyes and whatever, they're there to fight or whatever. And you've got somebody else that, they shut down. They're not talking. They're maybe apologizing, or, just being aware of those different dynamics of how people show up in team situations, right? So that we're leaning in to help the different types, because some are loud and others are, flight, and how we pick up on those cues,
Yes. And I think, again, if we're witnessing it, keep yourself regulated, like breathe, get into your body, be really like anchored in the moment, because if we're not anchored in the here and now, that past version of us is going to get hooked. And then whatever that hardwiring is going to be the response. So I think, yes, if you're a witness. Now, if it's you, like if we're the ones who are being triggered by any of these things, like we read 1 through 10, but 11 through 20, I'm going to give a quick kind of spiel of these, and then I'll share these in the conscious collective or in the conscious community conversation that we'll have conscious conversations. What's the word I'm trying to find here in the thread?
Yeah.
Okay. So more triggers. Receiving a no. Think about that, like 3-year-olds who don't like to be told no. That can also be 30-year-olds who don't like to be told no. Ambiguity or uncertainty. Feeling excluded, comparing yourselves to others, feeling rushed or pressured, dealing with incompetence, disorganization or chaos, others' strong emotions. I think that's an interesting one. Being challenged or questioned, and changes and plans. Any of those stick out to you?
I don't have a big one there.
I'm curious for you, what about disorganization or chaos?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I'm thinking like if it's real close to me, yeah. I feel like I control that, so I don't have that. I'm like, there's my boundaries, or my what I say, discernment. I'm like, I don't have that around me, because it, so yes,
because it would trigger you if you didn't have the boundary set up to
actually. I'm going to take us back to a person that you and I used to work with, and we won't use any names, but that
you don't even have to say it.
I feel it now.
Okay.
I feel it now. Yes. Okay. Yes. That chaos of, so 17 on the list. Definitely. I feel it.
You know what, I remember you calling me because I have boys and you have all of your bonus kids are boys.
Yeah.
And you're like, how do you deal with the constant? And I'm like, I don't know. I've lived in it. Like I do remember that conversation being there. That one doesn't bother me as much. It will eventually get to me. And, like, I'm like, okay, we've got to do something about this. But I will say my oldest son, I just want to share for like Brogan, something I'm really helping to coach him through right now. He's 20. He's trying to find his footing in life, and ambiguity and uncertainty is so like earth shattering to him. He does not like to know. He at 20 feels like he should know what his entire life is going to look like and what his career is going to be. And like he just feels like he needs to have all of the answers. And I think that can be, scary for us, that where if ambiguity and uncertainty create a lack of safety within us. And really all of life is somewhat ambiguous and uncertain. It's interesting to see that. Also, the other one I wanted to point out is other strong emotions. Like, I'm curious for listeners, when other people are having strong emotions, what happens within you? Is it is it a like shut down? Do you immediately shut down? Do you want to fight back with them and tell them why their feelings are wrong? Like, does that elicit some sort of fight or flight in you? Do you automatically go to compassion? I think that's a real teller of our emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm. And here's a truth bomb. As you look at these, when you read them off versus giving a scenario, it's like every time you give a scenario, I'm like, yeah, that is a trigger, actually. It's so there's a version in this for all of them. I think for every single one of us. It's just really thinking through, because as soon as you started to say this person with these loud emotions, I'm thinking of a scenario where I was out in public and I remember this guy just losing it. And it started to turn into this like injustice. And that's a big one for me, like how you treat other people. And so then I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that one will get me. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think that my hope that what people take away from our conversation is just, again, like a curiosity, not a judgment of their own triggers. We all have them. And I just want to like state over and over again that the more stressed we are, the easier the trigger is to hit. So if we're not doing things to manage our own stress and really keep things in check, then we're more likely to, have those triggers hit over and over and over again in small ways. It doesn't even have to be in big ways. So I think managing ourselves and that stress allows us to manage these triggers, but being curious and then again, untangling like, what emotion am I feeling? Because if we don't go to that, we immediately go to the story and we justify whatever our reaction or response is from the external stimuli, from the external points, the person, the situation. And in truth, this is an internal coaching opportunity of, what am I believing is true about me right now? What am I feeling in my body? What evidence do I have to point to that this isn't true, to really begin to rewire some of those old patterns that we may be carrying around? And so next steps from here, I'm going to copy and paste these top 20 into the thread in the PFN network. So if you're not already following that Conscious Conversations thread, I encourage you to go there. I'll post those top 20. It'll talk about the emotions most closely associated and then some deeper lessons we can get from those top 20 triggers. And then I'll also post the ego assessment that we utilize to just help people identify what is their top ego persona, because our triggers often follow our ego story. So that will all be in the Conscious Conversation thread.
I like it. I have a little closing thought that just was coming to mind when you were helping us to realize it's really how we're showing up in the moment. We're coming into this stressed. Obviously, things are a lot bigger. And I was just trying to think through a scenario really quick. So let's say that this guy that I just said was losing it emotionally. If I was in traffic running late to this meeting and I walk into this space, this room, and this person is losing it, versus I walk out of my hour-long yoga class into the lobby, this guy's losing it. it's going to be a completely different Nikki that shows up. You know, and that's the example of what was I doing to keep myself where I want to be, so that, you know, it's the same situation, but how I showed up coming out of yoga versus sitting in traffic running late. And that, there's the opportunity, you know?
Amen. That's
Yeah.
so good.
Okay.
Yes.
All
Awesome.
right.
Well, we are off next week. I am out traveling out west with my family, and so we do post these conscious conversations on YouTube also. So that gives you a chance to go back and maybe listen to some past ones if you missed it before. But we will be back the last week of July, whatever that date is. I think it's the 29th, but we'll be back then with the next conscious conversation.
Okay. Have so much
All
fun.
right. Thank you.
Yeah.
See you then. Bye.